$500 a month. That is the number you agreed to. 60 months. A clean signature on a Tuesday afternoon at a dealership that smelled like coffee and new carpet. The salesperson shook your hand. You drove home in something that still had the factory smell and the temporary paper plates and that specific feeling of having made a decision that felt, in that moment, completely reasonable. $500 a month is not an outrageous number. It is what millions of Americans pay for a car. It fits the budget. It cleared the bank's approval process. It is, by most measures, a normal thing that normal people do. The problem is what that number is quietly doing on the other side of the ledger. The side nobody shows you at the dealership. The side that does not appear on the window sticker, or the financing paperwork, or the monthly statement that arrives in your inbox so predictably that you stop really looking at it. That $500 a month is not just a car payment. It is a decision about your future that gets made once and then executes silently for 5 years. And for most people who make it, the full cost of that decision never gets calculated until it is already done. Think about how the conversation went. You needed a car, or wanted one, or the old one was getting expensive to repair, and the math started feeling like it made sense to upgrade. The dealer showed you monthly payments, not total costs. The finance manager asked what you were comfortable with per month and worked backward from there. The interest rate got mentioned somewhere in the middle of a lot of other numbers and felt like a small percentage of something large, which somehow translated in your mind into an acceptable cost. What you did not calculate in that room, because nobody handed you the calculator and nobody suggested you should, was the total cost of the vehicle over the life of the loan. The purchase price plus the interest paid equals a number that is meaningfully higher than the sticker. On a $32,000 car financed at 7% over 60 months, the total paid is approximately $38,000. You paid $6,000 to borrow money to buy a depreciating asset. And the car started losing value the moment you drove it off the lot. That is the transaction you actually made. Not the $500 a month. The $38,000 for something worth $24,000 by the time the loan ends. The payment is designed to feel manageable because it is. $500 spread across 30 days is $16.67 a day. The psychological distance between $500 monthly and the actual cost of the vehicle is enormous and is not accidental. The entire financing structure of the automobile industry is built around monthly payment psychology. People do not ask what a car costs. They ask what the payment is. And when the payment fits the budget, the conversation about whether the car itself is a good financial decision never happens. So the car gets bought. The payment gets automated. Life continues. The car sits in the driveway being a car. And the $500 disappears every month with the reliability of rent, gone, consumed, producing nothing except the continued right to drive a vehicle that is worth less every single month. This is not a story about the car. The car is fine. The car does what cars do. This is a story about what the payment was doing at the same time, on the other side of a ledger that you were not watching. Here is what $500 a month becomes when it is redirected instead of spent. $500 a month invested in a broad market index fund at the historical average annual return over 10 years produces approximately $96,000. Over 15 years, that number approaches $179,000. Over 20 years, the same $500 a month compounding quietly in the background becomes approximately $307,000. Not from a large lump sum. Not from a windfall or a bonus or a lucky trade. From the same $500 a month that is currently making a payment on something that will be worth a fraction of what you paid for it. That is the real cost of the car payment. Not $38,000. Not $500 a month. The real cost is the $96,000 that did not exist at year 10 because the money was spoken for. The $179,000 that did not exist at year 15. The $307,000 that did not accumulate over 20 years because every month, before any of that compounding could begin, $500 left the account. That is the part nobody shows you at the dealership. The payment is not competing against doing nothing with the money. It is competing against every other future that money could have created. The car gets older every month. The missed opportunity gets larger every month. And those two lines are moving in opposite directions the entire time. What makes this difficult to see is that nothing feels wrong while it is happening. The payment leaves the account. The car starts every morning. Life continues. There's no alarm that goes off. No warning email from the future. No notification that says, this decision is costing you more than you realize. The financial damage happens quietly. A year passes. Then another. Then another. The balance on the loan falls slowly. The value of the car falls quickly. And because neither change affects your daily routine, it is easy to assume everything is working exactly as planned. Most people never sit down and calculate how much they have actually spent on vehicles over the last 10 years. Not the purchase price. Not the monthly payment. The total number. Loan payments. Insurance differences. Registration fees. Interest. Trade-in losses. The hidden costs attached to every upgrade. When people finally do the math, the result is often shocking. Not because they bought one expensive car. Because they bought several reasonable cars in a row. That is how large financial leaks usually happen. Not through one catastrophic mistake. Through a series of perfectly normal decisions that nobody ever added together. Most people who understand this in the abstract do one of three things, and none of them fully solve the problem. The first is the justification. They run a version of the numbers in their head and conclude that the car is necessary, the payment is reasonable, the alternative would be unreliable transportation that costs money in a different way. All of this is sometimes true, and sometimes a story the brain tells to make a decision feel inevitable. The car that fits the budget is rarely the least expensive car that would have served the same purpose. Is usually the best car that fits the monthly payment. The second is the refinance. Once rates drop or credit improves, some people refinance the loan to a lower rate or extend the term to lower the payment. The lower payment feels like progress. It is rarely meaningful progress. The car is still depreciating. The total cost often increases when the term extends. The payment got smaller, but the drag on wealth building did not. The third is the cycle. This is where lifestyle inflation quietly takes over. The payment ends, and for a brief moment, there is an extra $500 a month available again. Then a newer model catches your eye. The dealership offers a trade-in. The monthly payment is only slightly higher than before. The process feels familiar because you have already done it once. So the payment survives. Different car. Same obligation. 5 years becomes 10. 10 becomes 15. Eventually, some people spend most of their working lives making a car payment without realizing it. The money never gets a chance to do anything else because every time it becomes free, it gets reassigned to another vehicle. The vehicle itself is not the problem. Most people genuinely need transportation. They need something that starts every morning, gets them to work, gets the kids where they need to go, and does not create stress every time a strange noise appears under the hood. The problem is not buying a car. The problem is slowly upgrading transportation into a lifestyle category without realizing it. Because the jump from a $15,000 vehicle to a $35,000 vehicle rarely changes your life as much as people imagine it will. The first few weeks feel different. The newer technology is nice. The seats are nicer. The screen is bigger. The ride is quieter. Then normal life returns. The commute is still the commute. Traffic is still traffic. The grocery store is still the grocery store. 6 months later, the vehicle that felt exciting has become normal, but the payment is still there. That is the part people underestimate. The excitement fades far faster than the obligation. And when this happens repeatedly over a working lifetime, the cost becomes enormous. Not because of one car. Because of every car. Because every upgrade resets the clock. Every upgrade restarts the payment. Every upgrade delays the moment when that money finally starts working for you instead of for the lender. Fast forward 15 years. One person spent those years upgrading vehicles every time the payment ended. The other kept cars longer and redirected the difference. The gap between those two lives is not usually visible in the driveway. It becomes visible in the investment account. It becomes visible in the amount of financial stress they carry. It becomes visible in the number of choices available to them when life changes unexpectedly. And that gap gets wider every year. The path forward for someone currently in a car payment is not dramatic. It does not require selling the car or defaulting on the loan or living without transportation. It requires two things. First, finish the loan without rolling it into a new purchase. The car payment ends when the loan ends. Most people extend it immediately. The person who lets the loan end and does not immediately replace it with a new one experiences a sudden monthly surplus that is real and significant. That surplus, $500 or whatever the payment was, needs to be redirected immediately and automatically before the lifestyle absorbs it. Second, change the decision framework for the next vehicle purchase. Not a moral commitment to never buy a new car. A financial calculation done before the next purchase that accounts for total cost of ownership, opportunity cost of the monthly payment, and the difference between what you need for transportation and what you are considering paying for transportation. That calculation, done honestly, changes what looks like a reasonable deal. A car that costs $500 a month for 60 months looks different when you have done the math on what that $500 becomes over the next 20 years if it goes somewhere other than a depreciating asset. There is a version of this that is harder to say. For some people, the car payment is not a financial mistake that happened accidentally. It is a financial decision that happened emotionally. The car is visible. The net worth statement is not. The investment account does not pull into the parking lot. The car communicates something to the outside world about success, about stability, about having arrived at a certain level of life. And that communication has value to people. Real psychological value. The honest version of this conversation includes acknowledging that the car payment is sometimes paying for something beyond transportation, is paying for an identity. And that is a legitimate human desire. People spend money on the way they feel and the way they are perceived, and there is nothing irrational about that. What changes the math is simply understanding the full price of that decision. The $500 a month for the feeling is a real cost, is not an invisible one. The question is whether the feeling is worth $307,000 over 20 years to the person paying for it. That is a personal answer, but it should be a conscious one. Most people who drive the $500 monthly payment car have never asked themselves whether the feeling it produces is worth $307,000 in foregone wealth. Not because they are careless, because nobody put the question to them directly. There is another reason this conversation matters. Life rarely follows the schedule we imagine. The transmission does not wait for a convenient year. Job losses do not arrive after checking your financial plan. Health issues do not ask whether now is a good time. The person with financial flexibility experiences those events differently than the person whose cash flow is already committed. A paid-off vehicle creates breathing room. A monthly payment removes breathing room. That difference may not matter during good years. It matters enormously during difficult years, because financial resilience is rarely built by one big decision. Is built by hundreds of smaller decisions that leave room for uncertainty. Every recurring payment reduces that room. Every eliminated payment increases it. And while a car payment may not seem connected to future financial stress, everything is connected when cash flow becomes tight. The less of your income that is already promised to someone else, the more options you have when life becomes unpredictable. Options are one of the most valuable financial assets a person can own. And monthly obligations quietly determine how many of those options exist. You are going to own cars for the rest of your working life. The only question is how much each one costs you. In total, including what the payment was doing on the other side of the ledger while you were driving it. The dealership will offer you a payment. That payment will feel manageable. It will fit the budget. The paperwork will be ready, and the handshake will be warm, and you will drive off on paper plates. And the transaction will feel complete. Is not complete. The real cost calculation has not started yet. It runs for the next 5 years at $500 a month. Then for the 5 years after that. If the cycle continues. Then for the 5 years after that. The $307,000 that compounds quietly in the background of a different decision is not visible at the dealership. It never is. It only becomes visible later, when the person who made the different decisions shows you what their account looks like. And you do the math. And the gap between two reasonable feeling choices turns out to be the difference between finishing your working years with options and finishing them with obligations. The payment felt manageable. The cost was something else entirely. If this landed differently than you expected, if you have been making a payment every month without ever calculating what that $500 is doing on the other side, subscribe. We cover the financial decisions that feel normal right up until the math gets done. Every week,